welcome to MhM Media Reacts. This week we're going to be talking about the third week of DC Rebirth books. I'm Chris McDonald. I'm joined by Kevin Allen.
Hey.
And Greg Smith.
Hey.
So we're going to open with Aquaman issue 1, which I felt was a solid first issue. It was definitely a lot better than the Rebirth issue that didn't really seem to impress anyone. It has some nice ideas of dealing with Aquaman and him having to balance his Atlantis life and his human life. We're seeing now that he's trying to build, an embassy to bridge the gaps between the cultures and really push an understanding where there really hasn't been. That Atlantis has been really isolated from the outside world and always a lot of animosity, and this is meaning a lot to him. We got a look at how much that means to him, a good look at the relationship him and Mera have, and we're already seeing where the threats are going to be coming from. So it's a solid first issue. It has an interesting idea of where to take Aquaman, but I don't think it's among the strongest. Moving on, speaking of issues that aren't the strongest, we have the second issue of this current Action Comics run. So Kev, what did you think?
I'm just going to be blunt here. I think that this book is awful. I think it's... I've read the majority of these issues, and for me it's the worst book of the last 2 or 3 weeks. It's just soulless, empty. There's no real content. It's just shallow. It's just endless fight scenes, and they're not even dynamic or exciting or interesting. It's just an empty shell of a book, and at this point I just have no faith in its future after 2 issues.
Yeah. And any thoughts of your own for it, Greg?
I read 3 pages and wanted to break something. It was just that bad a book. It was a shame because the first issue, it showed some promise. And promise is a word that I use very lightly when talking about Superman comics because they've been that bad for a long time. So I was really expecting and hoping that we were going to get a decent Superman arc in Action Comics. Oh boy, was I wrong. It was just, this was not the arc I wanted to read. Again, after 3 pages, I just wanted to be done with it, but I carried on. I kept with it right till the end page, and nothing changed. It literally was a huge fight with maybe 4 panels focusing on Lois and the kid, and then it went back to this really boring, over-the-top fight that we've seen many times before between Superman and Doomsday. And this time, by throwing Lex Luthor into the equation, they thought, hey, this might actually make things more entertaining. Nope, it doesn't. It just makes it more dull. So nothing new there, and I certainly won't be continuing reading this one. I exactly sum up with what Kev's feelings are towards that book. It was just a big pile of crap, and I don't see it getting any better. I think that was issue 1 seemed to be its ceiling. Unfortunately, it's a sad thing to say, but I think it's true.
Yeah, I think it reads a bit of a book out of its time. It does feel like some of the lesser fondly remembered Superman comics in the 90s. So moving on a bit, we have Detective Comics, which seems to be getting off to a better showing. How did you feel about that, Greg?
Yeah, it was just more of the same again from the last issue. I really did enjoy it, to be fair, and it focused on just more of the gang getting together and the relationships they had. The main one that I liked, that it focused on early, and it's going to establish a relationship quite early on in the comic's life, it seems, is Stephanie Brown and Tim Drake. That was something that they hit on with straight away, really, as soon as those characters were introduced in that issue. And that's something that I like. I've always really enjoyed the dynamic they had together, so it's good to see that in the early pages and early life of this comic. Again, though, well, not again. Actually, this comic had Bruce really taken the center of attention. He was the center role in this issue. I'd say it was mostly Kate Kane in the last issue, but in this one, Bruce was more of a center role. It did feel like more of his book in this issue than it did issue 1, where it focused on reintroducing the Bat family. Kate did probably have the most time after Bruce, but it definitely felt more like Bruce's book in this one. But that didn't take away from any of the other characters too much. It showed you enough Bruce, but it did show you enough of the other characters to enjoy them and have have a focus on where their stories are going as well. So solid issue, I thought, and again, I'm like looking forward to seeing where that story is going. But I'm really liking what I'm seeing so far.
Yeah, for me, I think I have a slightly different view. I felt the characters, most of them, got a decent amount of time. We're starting to see the team roles develop and who's going to serve what purpose on the team. We're already seeing that Kate is going to be pushing the team to every extreme, and Tim Drake's going to be that guy who's pushing back for the team's sake and trying to say...
That was a good opening. That was a good opening scene, actually. That was really good, yeah.
And we even saw him take his concerns to Bruce as well and campaign that Kate might be pushing too far. So we've seen that Tim is being that looking out for everyone and having that clash of leadership where he's kind of leading within the team, whereas Kate's sort of training up the team. It was also interesting how much the issue was taking a few cues from X-Men. We actually had the not so thinly disguised danger room that they're being trained in, even called the mud room and everything.
The mud room, yeah. Good one, DC.
So it was an interesting nod to see. I might go back to the issue and look, 'cause I didn't feel Batman was as present as maybe you did, and maybe I was just I didn't notice as much. To be fair,
once I read it a second time, it was more once Kane and Tim have their little feud, and you're introduced to the Tim and Stephanie Brim relationship again. From then onwards, it's very Bruce heavy. If you do go back and read it, you'd see that. But yeah,
Bruce was a big part, but for a lot of it was Tim going to Bruce with his concerns, so it felt, Tim had a big part in that as well. And then we had this
Tim. Yeah, no, I agree. Apart from Bruce and Kane, Tim's probably the most important character in the book so far, which is great because I've always really liked Tim Drake, and the Red Robin run years ago was probably one of my favourite Tim Drake stories. Yeah. So it's good to see him being centre of attention again and going to Bruce about any issues he has. It's definitely an interesting dynamic between the two now that Kate Kane's in the role that she is.
Yeah, speaking of the Red Robin one, actually, that brings me to another point I was going to address. It's something I did touch on with the previous issue, but I'm still feeling it now. In that Red Robin run, Tim grew from being very neurotic, self-doubting, like he was a great detective, but he was filled with self-doubt and a lot of confidence issues. And over that Red Robin run, he moved past quite a lot of them and became quite a driven and determined person. He had quite a lot of character growth, and in different ones as well. We saw the same with Stephanie and Cass, and again, I just keep getting reminded at each one of these issues that for as much as it's great to have these characters back, there is that sense that we have lost all that growth that we went through them with, and we're having to see that happen again. Because we're back to a Tim who's having there's a lot more neurotic, having this self-doubt. We're back to a Cass who seems unable to talk. We're back to a Steph in quite an early stage in her career as well. She hasn't had that same growth that she did through her Batgirl run, so that's something that does keep standing out to me with it. But I do think it's still quite strong, and the benefit of having these characters back and the different voices they bring to the Bat family is still definitely worth it. And I did like at tail end the issue starting to get to see of some of Cass, Tim, and Steph just sort of hanging out somewhat outside the team, and how they're feeling about the team itself as well.
Yeah.
We didn't get much, but we did start to get signs of where Clayface's story might be going here that I know was looking to resonate with you early on.
Yeah. I thought Clayface, his presence wasn't as big as it was in the first issue, but again, I think they're going to slowly develop his story and build his foundation as a character in this group. It does still strike you as odd because it's Clayface, but the pieces are in place, to really make a good go of his character. So we'll see where it goes. But overall, though, I think we both agree that it was an enjoyable book, and it's on a solid pace so far. So
Yeah, the only thing I want to close out with on it is the one concern I do have is when you get to the end of the issue, the main story arc seems to be stepping on a lot of story points from Arkham Knight that I'm not
Yeah,
too
yeah.
keen on it exploring that direction. I'll need to see how it's handled, and it's also interesting because what the implications of that might mean. Like, does this mean we're going to see it tackle Jason Todd as the Arkham Knight, or is that Bat Army that's styled to look like the Arkham Knight going to be something different in the comics? So, it'll be interesting to see where that goes, but I am slightly cautious about that. Moving on, though, we had Flash one as well. How did you feel about that, Greg?
Again, I really enjoyed Flash. I've really enjoyed the first Rebirth issue and the first number 1 that obviously came out. Again, I really did like it. I was focusing on just again continuing the story at quite a fast pace. Definitely no pun intended there. It was just they were flying through a lot of stuff to try and pave way. But by the series end, and this is my most vocal point here, is I'm really not sure if we're ready for another metahuman Flash. You know, in a starring role. I mean, we already have Barry. Now we have Wally back. You know, there's the other Wally as well. So I don't know. I don't know where they're going to go with that. If they do end up going down, this could just be for an arc, and it could be nothing, or this could be a new development of another Flash type character. You know, that's able to tap into the Speed Force and be involved in that world. If that's the case, then I'm not really keen on that. I don't. That's not really anything that I'm interested in. They teased a lot in that issue, where we're going to get that interaction, that build of that character, the development of those particular characters interacting, and seeing where that's going. And they also kind of lightly touched on the villains that we'll be seeing as well. But overall, I did enjoy the issue up until that point, because I don't know where I stand on that right now. What would you think of it, Chris?
Well, I don't have the same interpretation of the ending you did. I don't think this is an attempt to bring us like a new Flash, especially when they're still restructuring what we're doing here. We've just got Wally back. We don't know what's going to be the state of play with Jay Garrick and stuff, and you know, we've still got the other Wally is still part of this world as well.
Yeah.
So I don't think that I don't think they're running out and about to just have a new Flash or a new like Speedster as a main starring hero role. It's definitely tying into the Speed Force, but the Speed Force is a dangerous thing, and it doesn't go well. Like, people have been lost to the Speed Force or hurt by it, so there's a lot of ways it can go. I certainly didn't look at that ending and just believe that DC was launching a new character out of this.
Yeah, I mean, that's not what I believe. It's just a fear I have. I don't, want them to do that. So hopefully, I just kind of looked into it too much. But yeah.
Overall, I felt it was a solid issue. Although I did feel so much of the issue was built around establishing for the readership who Barry is, which the Rebirth issue also kind of half did.
Yeah.
So it was a kind of odd follow-on from me in that regard. But I'm curious to see where the
book of two halves, because it was half one in the Rebirth issue was Barry and identifying who he was, and that continued in this issue.
Yeah.
Obviously, the second part of the Rebirth issue, of course, was touching on Bruce and Barry in the Watchmen, and this didn't really mention that too much because of this new conclusion at the end of the issue. But
well, I felt like it brought it up to say that that's not going to be handled in the Flash book. Like, it had a quick aside to it in a way that made me like,
it did.
This isn't the book for that.
Yeah.
But moving on to the last book of the week, we have Wonder Woman, which we were quite impressed with the Rebirth. How did you feel about the issue 1, Kev?
I really liked it, and I do think that Wonder Woman is still the best book that DC has at the moment, but I don't think it was quite as strong as the first issue. I don't think it was as imaginative or inventive, I guess, but on the whole, I did really like it. I think Liam Sharp's art continues to be awesome, one of my favourite artists at the moment. I like the sort of balance or contrast of Wonder Woman's journey with Steve Trevor's at the same time. They were both going through very different events, but it was sort of showing the contrast of those two, and then we're going to see that inevitably collide. As for Steve Trevor, we saw him go full Chris Redfield in this issue, which was interesting to see. I'd always thought he had that element to him, but he showed it even more this time. What did you think of main man Chris Redfield, Greg?
I was impressed by his beard, but I'm not going to truly buy his character until I see him punching some boulders. So until we see that, I'm on. I'm only halfway there. But no, it's all fun aside. I really did like Steve's story. And the contrast between his and the Wonder Woman story it fit in really well. They both kind of, I don't know, they just kind of went really well together in an odd way. It's not something that in a Wonder Woman book you would find that would really work that way, but it does. And then that's really a really good thing. Wonder Woman story, again, itself, I wasn't a huge fan of the Rebirth issue. I didn't hate it by any means. I did enjoy it, but I was a bit confused as to what they were trying to do. But after reading this issue, I'm more assured now of the direction where the book's going, and the future of the book does look really bright. The art is really amazing. That was the thing that jumped out at me straight. With that last page with Cheetah and Wonder Woman was one of the best final pieces I've seen in comic for quite some time. The shading detail and everything was just really spot on. But the story itself looks like to be an interesting one, and full of mystery and suspense and lots of beards with Steve Trevor. So it's something that I'll be reading more of anyway.
Yeah, I agree. It's still definitely the standout book for me as well. Although I do agree with Kev, it had a drop off from the first issue slightly, but I don't see that something that's going to be a problem for the run going forward.
It didn't drop off a cliff, like it was still a pretty damn good book,
Yeah. One thing that really
I've done all these like cliffs and boulders, and I'm not trying to do that on purpose. It's just once you said Chris Redfield, it's on the brain.
But yeah, one thing that stood out to me in the Rebirth and continues to stand out to me in this is how almost abstract and ethereal the Wonder Woman side of it all feels. There's almost this unreal quality to her journey and what she's going through and where she's visiting, and I do appreciate that aspect quite a lot. One thing that was a little jarring for me slightly is because of how different the military side of it was and how much establishing that took compared to everything else, I did feel this odd pacing clash where the Wonder Woman stuff was quite minimalistic a lot of the time, and then a lot of the army stuff really wasn't, and it made it feel to me like the army stuff was taking up a bigger part of the issue than it actually was, just because of it being so much more verbose. But I am looking forward to where it's going. I am excited for when Steve and Wonder Woman actually meet, and what the ending of the issue proposes is very interesting and actually leads us into an even bigger point of mystery than the Rebirth had left us off with. So that was our thoughts on DC Rebirth Week 4. Let us know what you thought, and like, comment and subscribe.